We often focus on sugar and carbs as the main focus to eliminate on a low carb and keto diet. But what if there are other foods quietly raising your insulin levels that you need to be aware of? Maybe these 5 sneaky culprits are sabotaging your results. Hi, I'm Dr. Eric Westman, and welcome to my channel where I review and debunk nutritional misinformation online. In this video, we're going to hear from a health coach who will be talking about things in the diet that may be sabotaging your results, raising insulin levels that are not obvious, and be sure to wait till the end to hear my final thoughts.
A lot of us are told to only focus on blood sugar. If blood sugar looks normal, then we're good. But that isn't the full story. There are foods, some of them are even labeled as healthy, low carb, even keto, don't raise your blood sugar at all, but that still trigger insulin. And if you're dealing with insulin resistance, prediabetes, or stubborn belly fat that won't budge, that spike in insulin can silently work against you. I see this all of the time. People cutting carbs, doing all of the seemingly right things, but they're still stuck. And it's not their fault. Most people don't understand how insulin actually works and why it matters even more than blood sugar does.
So always consider the source. I think this is the first time that I've reviewed or react to Health Coach Kate's videos. And I love the idea that more and more people are teaching, more and more people who don't need medical degrees can learn and from themselves and others how to adjust the diet in a way that lowers insulin resistance. And I think that's a theme that Health Coach Kate has. And here, the other aspect that I like is that she's actually teaching people and having presumably them coming back, telling them what works, what doesn't work, and not just pushing out information without regard to whether it's working for people. So I think it's always important to consider the source of the video, what their background is, their training, of course, and then whether they're in the clinic or teaching through some kind of practice to learn from the practical reality of what works, what doesn't work, what's available today in the food, grocery stores and all. That's really important to know.
In some ways. So in this video, I'm going to be breaking down 5 sneaky foods that could be hindering your results, even if your glucose monitor says everything's fine. Some of these might surprise you.
Even the blood glucose and insulin story, of course, it's important. And the hiding of an elevated insulin under a low or normal glucose is something that you may miss if you only check the glucose response. Back in the day, you would have a clinic that would do a blood glucose and insulin tolerance tests and see over a period of hours if the blood glucose and insulin would go up. Very few clinics are doing that. So yeah, you can hide an elevated insulin behind a relatively normal glucose.
And I can almost guarantee that at least one of them is in your kitchen right now. So let's get into it. Hi, I'm Kate, a nutritionist who specializes in insulin resistance and blood sugar control. I have helped hundreds of clients reverse insulin resistance, prediabetes, and PCOS naturally, without restrictive diets or extreme measures. And I've seen firsthand how tricky insulin can be, even for those who have seemingly good blood sugar. So let's dive straight into it, with probably the most sneaky food that you don't realize could be spiking your insulin, and that's diet soda. Now, on paper, it looks perfect, right? 0 sugar, 0 calories, and still tastes pretty good. You'd think it has no effect on your metabolism at all, but here's the twist. Even though it doesn't spike blood sugar, it can still spike insulin. And no, I'm not saying that to scare you. There's actually science behind it.
So I get this all the time in the clinic. That, oh, I can't have artificial sweeteners, I can't have sweet things because they're worse than sugar in terms of cancer and other metabolic effects. And actually, I'm kind of a naysayer on the worry about artificial sweeteners because I want people to use them to get off sugar at first. So I teach that it's okay to have these non-sugar sweeteners. And the idea that it raises insulin levels is, I think, an urban legend. And I want to know your documented evidence down below. This paper I know very well, and I reviewed it, and it's in animals, not humans, non-human animals, and the amount of insulin change was almost minuscule. Very difficult to extrapolate that back to humans. And in an old book by Jason Fung that had a paper in there cited that insulin can go up from artificial sweeteners, was not in the context of a low-carb diet. So trying to get information from people in humans, but then also for people who are on low-carb diets, maybe the response is different if you're eating carbs, having some sugar, and now you're adding the non-sugar sweeteners. So I even had a individual really believe that the insulin level went up after having something like sugar-free gum. It was some other non-sugar sweetener. She came to the lab and sat for a couple hours, and the insulin did not go up. And so I'm interested in a couple things in the comments. Did stopping artificial sweeteners, and that's the only thing you did, get you out of a stall? That's important information too. And did you ever really have an insulin measure checked? It's a blood test that's hard to do, to document that the non-sugar sweetener really raised the insulin level, because I haven't seen it.
When you drink these artificial sweeteners that taste sweet, yes, they don't contain any sugar, but your brain doesn't know that. It tastes the sweetness and it anticipates that there's sugar coming in, so it releases insulin. Your body responds with what is called the cephalic phase insulin release. Basically, it's getting a head start. Your brain signals to your pancreas, hey, there's sugar coming. Let's get the insulin ready. But what it doesn't know is that there's actually no sugar in the drink at all. It's like prepping for a fire that never actually happens. So blood sugar stays steady, but insulin spikes behind the scenes. And if you're someone dealing with insulin resistance or stubborn weight you can't lose, this matters.
So this is the theory. I haven't seen the theory reduced to practice to document a cephalic phase that's a significant rise in insulin. I mean, I'm not talking about a micro unit here. It has to be clinically relevant insulin rise.
Because the goal isn't just to keep glucose in check. The real key to reversing insulin resistance is keeping your insulin levels low and steady over time. Now, I'm not saying that one can of diet soda here and there is going to ruin your progress. This isn't about perfection. But if you're drinking diet soda every day, you might be unknowingly keeping your insulin levels elevated all day long.
Well, and there is kind of the common sense that we practitioners commonly have, which is just don't have much of it, and then whatever effect there might be won't be there, when I'm not sure there's an effect at all. I've seen people have lots and lots of diet sodas to get them off the sugar. Now, I'm not promoting non-sugar sweeteners as a tool forever for health benefits. I use it to get people off of sugar.
Now, number 2, this one might surprise you, and this is the one that you almost certainly have in your fridge, and that's lean chicken breast. This is one of the fitness world's favorite foods. And don't get me wrong, chicken breast is an excellent source of protein. It's a complete protein source containing all of the amino acids your body needs. But here's what most people don't realize. When you eat very lean protein on its own, like chicken breast, it can spike your insulin, and sometimes a lot. But why does this happen? Because typically we associate insulin spikes with blood sugar spikes and with carbohydrates and sugar. But protein? How does this make sense? A moderate insulin response to protein is actually normal, and it's not a bad thing. We actually need insulin to shuttle amino acids into our muscles after we eat. But when you strip away the fat, which naturally slows digestion and moderates the insulin release, the spike becomes sharper. And here's the kicker. In people who are already insulin resistant, when they have lean protein like this, the spike is even bigger.
Yeah, so I'd like to see some data on this. While it kind of makes sense, you have to consider the context as well. If you're eating and trying to lose lots of weight, reverse type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, or obesity, these are relatively minor concerns. And I wouldn't worry if you're just having chicken breast or just the meat without much vegetables. And so the rise in insulin after protein is real. In fact, type 1s, people with type 1 diabetes who don't make any insulin on their own, adjust their insulin shot based on the carbohydrates and on the protein in the food. So there is a response, but I hate that word spike. Spike, how high? Is it a little spike, like or is it a really big spike? But I guess the point here she's trying to make is that if you're trying to get a certain macro level, like having more fat to hit which I don't ask people to do in my program, if you're trying to get more fat than protein, if you're trying to reduce the protein absorption by adding fat to the meal, it kind of makes sense, but I'm still kind of skeptical of it.
And sometimes a bit of that protein can actually be converted to glucose and cause your blood sugar to go up as well. Now, we don't see this in people who are metabolically healthy, only those who are insulin resistant and only when they have lean protein on their own. And this is why I always say to pair your protein with fat. Fat slows down digestion, it keeps your blood sugar stable, and helps your body respond more gently to protein. So instead of plain chicken breast, go for chicken thighs, drumsticks, skin on, or even just cook it in olive oil, butter, or ghee. Not only does it taste better this way, but it's metabolically smarter. Now, a quick...
Well, I don't mind that recommendation for other reasons. That is, some people carry over the old low-fat dogma, have a lean piece of chicken, when you don't have to watch the fats like that. You don't have to limit them. And I would rather have you eat the fat on the chicken or the fat on the meat just because it's more tasty, and you don't have to limit fats on a low carb diet. What happens is the amount you eat just naturally gets reduced because of the fat burning that's going on. So the other component of the diet that she's not talking about that's really important is whether you're keto or not. And if you're talking about a keto level of carb restriction, then you're going to want to think about things a little differently. And it could be, like she's saying, that the effect of these foods are different depending on whether you're at a ketogenic level of carbs or not.
Now, a quick reminder, insulin spikes are not inherently bad. It's not about avoiding insulin altogether. That's impossible, and that's not the goal. The problem is when insulin is chronically elevated all day, which is what drives insulin resistance, weight gain, and even type 2 diabetes. Carbohydrates spike blood sugar and insulin, and that's why cutting down or being smart about carbs helps to reverse insulin resistance. And yes, protein does raise insulin too, and especially when it's lean. But here's the difference. We can't cut protein out of our diet. If you go too low on protein, your health will suffer. You'll lose muscle mass, your bones will weaken, your metabolism will slow down, and honestly, you'll just feel like garbage. So yes, we do want to keep insulin low in order to reverse insulin resistance, but if we're being smart about carbohydrates and limiting them where we can, then the insulin response we get from protein isn't going to be a concern. The solution isn't to avoid protein. It's just to eat it in the right way. Pair it with fat, make your meals more balanced, and don't fear those slightly fattier cuts of meat. They're often better for your blood sugar and insulin.
Well, before we get to number 3, it always has been a curiosity to me that you would do things in a certain way with the timing of foods and worry of having fat and protein. We have an amazing stomach and intestinal process that actually takes time, and studies that are looking at just one aspect of food sometimes don't correlate in the intact human. They're not necessarily predictive of what will happen if you're eating something that is added on to the digestion that's going on from yesterday, for example. So anyway, I'm not one to advise necessarily that you have to add things certain ways. If this is a way of teaching that's working for you and helpful, then that would be fine with me. I don't require people to do this.
Number 3 is another one that might surprise you, and that's egg whites. And yep, it's basically the same story as chicken breast here. Egg whites are basically pure protein. No fat, no fiber, and when you eat them on their own, like an egg white omelet or in a protein pancake, you're setting yourself up for the same issue as with lean chicken, a more exaggerated insulin spike. Now, contrast that with a whole egg. The yolk is where all the nutrients are. Choline, B vitamins, selenium, fat-soluble vitamins like A, D, E, and K, and especially fat. Studies have shown that whole eggs actually promote better blood sugar control and satiety than egg whites alone, especially in insulin-resistant individuals. So let's just call it what it is. The egg white era was a lie. It came from that low-fat diet culture that told us fat was the enemy and cholesterol was scary, but we know better now. Side note on cholesterol, even the US dietary guidelines, which previously said to limit dietary cholesterol, removed it as a nutrient of concern in 2015. Since then, and that was 10 years ago, there has not been an upper limit on how much dietary cholesterol is bad. And that's because it's not. But we still have this fear around it. The yolk isn't dangerous. It's actually beneficial. And in more ways than one. Your metabolism will thank you for eating the whole egg.
Yeah, and that information about cholesterol being fine hasn't percolated into all of the medical offices, that's for sure.
And it tastes better as well. So next time you go to make breakfast, don't throw out the yolk. Your hormones, your energy, your blood sugar will be better off for it. Number 4 is protein bars. And this one you'll see everywhere, especially in the health food aisle. Now, I'm not saying that all protein bars are bad. There are a few brands out there that are okay, but the vast majority of them, they're sweetened with artificial sweeteners, which we've already spoken about. Once again, this can trigger insulin just from the sweet taste, especially when paired with protein. And another downside is that they're often ultra-processed and contain gut-disrupting fibers like inulin or IMO. These can cause bloating and inflammation in sensitive people. So what you end up with is a seemingly low-carb snack that doesn't spike blood sugar, but it's spiking your insulin. And beyond raising your insulin, it's also going to increase cravings and leave you wondering why you're not losing weight on a low-carb diet.
Well, of course, if you're one of my patients or you've learned our method that we teach, we say avoid these low-carb bars and products. If it says keto on it, be very careful. Always watch the total carbs, not the net carbs. I wanted to go back and mention the yolk and egg white. The rationale is interesting. I've never really heard that the reason to have the yolk is to lower the protein spike, but I want you to have the yolk because it's so nutritious and delicious. So, the whole egg white thing. On the other hand, some people tell me they don't like the yolks, and I don't push them past what someone likes. So having flexibility about it, I think, is really important too. The bars and all, I have to say the taste has come a long way. 10 years ago, these bars kind of tasted metallic and the taste has improved for sure, but still it has all of these other ingredients that who knows what they're doing, can stimulate the hunger even more. When I look at the product, so I look at the total carbs, and these bars typically are not low enough to include. Some of the low carb shakes can be low enough to include, and you don't have to drink the whole shake if you're having that. So I guess I do violate it must be, real food as a 100% theme, but you always want to be careful about the total carbohydrates.
And finally, number 5 is branched chain amino acids and amino acid supplements in general. Now, it's not technically a food, but I am going to include it here because, again, this one surprises a lot of people. If you've ever fasted or worked out in the morning and sipped on some BCAAs, thinking you were staying in the fasted state, this one's for you. Branched chain amino acids like leucine, isoleucine, and valine raise insulin a lot. In fact, leucine can spike insulin almost as much as glucose. But why does that happen? It's because it's trying to drive muscle growth and recovery, which is great in the right context, but not so much if you're trying to keep your insulin levels low. So while these are popular in the fitness world, especially among people doing intermittent fasting, they can absolutely disrupt the fasted state metabolically. You're technically not eating, but your insulin response says otherwise. Now, if you're an elite athlete doing 2 sessions a day, then yes, they can be beneficial in that context. But if you're someone who's trying to reverse insulin resistance, better control your blood sugar, bring your fasting blood sugar down, lose excess body fat, then you are definitely better off without them. Instead, hydrate with electrolytes during your fast. Ones without added sugar or artificial sweeteners. I mention them all the time because I absolutely love them and the people behind the company are great. But Sodi's everyday hydration salts, they're my go-to. No sugar, no artificial sweetener. They don't break a fast. They don't raise insulin. They actually contain a good amount of electrolytes. Stick to having those during your fasting window instead. Okay, so we've covered a lot in today's video. Let's quickly recap the 5 sneaky foods that could be raising your insulin. Number 1 is diet soda. Number 2 is lean chicken breast. Number 3 is egg whites. Number 4 is protein bars with artificial sweeteners. And number 5 is branched chain amino acids.
Yeah, I think a very good perspective, especially if you're young and not doing a keto kind of approach. And if you're exercising, all of these other things are going to moderate the amount of carbs you can have. I'm a little skeptical about number 1 because my experience with lots and lots of people, thousands of people, is that you can reduce or reverse insulin resistance and diabetes, type 2 diabetes, while drinking diet soda. That doesn't mean some people can't use diet soda, but most can. And then the real food kind of litmus test of lean chicken breast and egg whites, if that's an option or a compromise to keep you away from carbs, I would say it's the amount of protein, the amount of insulin rise is minimal. And then number 4 and 5, of course, just don't meet the bar, so to speak, of being real foods that you want to focus on. She mentions the context, which is fantastic, because if you're losing weight, reversing diabetes, that's a different context and you're burning fat, you're in keto metabolism. If you're not using this for a keto lifestyle or metabolism, you may be able to eat more carbs and have some of these other things. And if you do hit a stall, these things may work in that context. If you're not trying to be similar or recreate what I'm trying to do in a clinical setting. Well, in general, I like the video. I like the style, the approach of lowering insulin resistance, looking at health coach Kate's background and the work. It's solid. It's very clinically based. Whether these little changes make huge effects, I don't know. I'm still skeptical about the total prohibition of the artificial sweeteners. We use them all the time in the clinical setting. Let me know your results if you've had trouble with them or can use them without any difficulty in terms of insulin resistance or diabetes. If you like this, please like, subscribe, ring the notification bell, and look for new content on Wednesdays and Fridays. If you enjoyed this video, consider joining our YouTube membership for early access and exclusive live Q&As with me. Just click the join button below or support us with a PayPal in the description.